of joy.
We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Villegas not guilty of...
Is overturned. As to Ms. Mellen, the case is...
All right, the case will be dismissed. Mr. Jackson, you're going to be free to go. I suggest to you that life is filled with small victories, and this is a big one.
This is John Bunn, and he is in court, waiting to hear his fate after spending 27 years in prison for the murder of an officer, a murder he has always insisted he did not commit. It all started in Brooklyn. John was only 14 years old when he was placed under arrest for murder. On August 14, 1991, two Rikers Island corrections officers were ambushed and shot during a robbery in the Kingsborough housing project.
John Bunn's journey for justice began on August 13, 1991. Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Two off-duty correction officers were ambushed.
The two gunmen forced the officers from their car, shot them, and then stole the car.
The surviving officer described the shooters as two light-skinned black men in their 20s. However, John was none of those things. But the next day, NYPD Detective Louis Scarcella arrested John Bunn and Rosen Hargrave, age 17, on what was called an anonymous tip. Afterwards, Crossan, the surviving officer, later identified them in a photo lineup, a lineup arranged by Scarcella's partner. All John needed to be charged with murder was that the detective in charge of the investigations decided John was the answer. In 1992, a jury convicted both teens of second-degree murder. John's entire adolescence happened behind steel bars. He was first sent to a juvenile facility upstate with no real schooling, where he taught himself to read properly, and then earned his GED at 17. At that same age, he was transferred to Elmira Correctional Facility, a place built for hard-time adult offenders, not a boy. He served 16 years, then was paroled in 2006 for good behavior, but even now in the outside world, he was still trapped under the weight of a murder conviction he knew wasn't his. So he spent the next 11 years fighting to clear his name.
I didn't have a voice, I was trapped.
Then, everything changed. In 2013, evidence surfaced exposing Detective Scarcella's widespread misconduct. There were forced confessions, falsified reports, manipulated lineups. In 2015, a judge vacated Hargrave's conviction. And then, a year later, Bunn was in court to hear his own fate. Justice Shondiah Simpson noted that key evidence, like blood from the shooter on the police car, had been destroyed. By 2018, the appellate court upheld the decision and the charges were dismissed.
It's time the people do move to dismiss the indictment.
But the moment that broke everyone in the courtroom came right after the ruling.
I want to say, I want to say thank you, Your Honor, because in 27 years, I've been fighting.
Instead, he looked around the courtroom, the place that stole his life, and said,
All together.
I want y'all to know that y'all convicted and had a wrong man.
Before John walked out, he shared an emotional moment with Judge Simpson herself.
After the tears of joy,
outside the courtroom, he addressed the press.
Feel overly blessed and just thanking God that we reached this point.
John later filed a lawsuit for malicious prosecution, denial of due process, and civil rights conspiracy. New York City eventually settled with him for $5.9 million. John Bunn spent 27 years locked up for a murder he didn't commit, but this next defendant lost 17 years, all because of a lie that never should have reached a courtroom. This is Susan Mellen, and she is in court, waiting for her case as the weight of 17 years of imprisonment sits on her shoulders. But before this moment, there was the nightmare that dragged her here. Back in 1997, Susan was a fragile but loving mother trying to rebuild her life. She briefly dated Rick Daley, but when the relationship ended and life moved on, fate set her on a path no innocent mother should ever walk. By July of that year, she was living with her boyfriend Tom, packing up boxes, preparing to move into a new home in Gardena. But several miles away, in an abandoned house, 3 gang members attacked Rick Daley in a brutal assault. And somehow, The police at the scene decided Susan had something to do with the attack. She was 42 years old, sitting in a McDonald's parking lot with her daughter, just trying to buy a Happy Meal when LAPD units surrounded her car. But even while in custody, she maintained her innocence.
I went home, I would never, from my heart and my soul, I would never let somebody do that to anybody. I didn't hate Rick, I would never let anybody do something I hated, or I still, I had feelings for the man. He was good for me, he was good to me, he was good to my kids, he loved my kids, and I went to the funeral, and it's like, it was a 6.
But the police was not convinced in the least.
You know what? You told me you were going to tell me the truth. You're not telling me the truth. You are under arrest now for murder. I'm getting ready to book you. Now, obviously, you don't care about your family. You don't care about your daughters.
At some point, Susan offers to take a lie detector test to prove that she was telling the truth.
Hold on a second.
But instead of listening to her, the detective ignores her and instead tries to show her photos of the deceased body of Rick Daley.
Because, here's Rick. Here's his body. I'm not showing you anything. There's his body. Well, you already saw it, so I don't have to show it to you again.
Susan was finally charged with murder with no DNA, no physical evidence, nothing except the claim of a jailhouse informant who said Susan had confessed. One unreliable witness. She was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, but fortunately the story does not end there. Years later, the truth broke through. The informant which the prosecution built their whole case on wasn't just unreliable, she was exposed as a pathological liar, a woman whose testimony never should have been used to convict anyone. And that brings us here to this courtroom moment.
Is overturned. As to Ms. Mellen, the case is...
Susan's first stop as a free woman was to McDonald's to finally deliver the Happy Meal she promised her daughter 17 years earlier.
Story from our partners at Yahoo about a mother of 3 set free from prison after serving 17 years for a murder she did.
I always wanted to have a cake for each of them because all the birthdays I left, so I wanted a cake for each one with their names on it.
17 years worth of presents.
Okay.
The state of California later awarded Susan $597,000 with the city of Los Angeles, agreeing to pay her $12 million. Susan served 17 years for a murder she had nothing to do with. But how does that compare to a man who spent 45 years in prison for a crime with no physical evidence at all? This is Vincent Alfred Simmons, a man who spent 45 years behind the walls of Angola for a crime he has always sworn he did not commit. Today he's in court again to finally find out if anyone will listen to the truth he's been saying since 1977.
16 times, at least.
Yes.
So this would be 17. You think this will be the time?
Yes.
Vincent Simmons grew up in Mansoura, Louisiana, and on May 23, 1977, 1 week after returning to his hometown, police picked him up. 14-year-old twin sisters, Karen and Sharon Sanders, had reported that 2 weeks earlier, they were kidnapped and raped by a black man.
He raped 2 of us, and he put us in a trunk to... He had me write our names down, and he told us he was going to us.
However, when the officers asked the girls to describe the attacker, they could not.
Yes.
You never gave the name Simmons.
No, we did not.
You never described what he looked like.
No, we did not.
You said all...
blacks look alike.
And you said all N-words.
That's right.
But the next day, in a lineup of 7 men where Vincent was the only man handcuffed and placed in the center, the twins pointed at him. What happened next looked less like an investigation and more like a setup. Inside the police station, Vincent said he refused to confess, so the officers beat him. Police, of course, told a very different story, saying he was restrained only when he assaulted an officer, but they never charged him with the attempted murder of an officer they claimed he committed. In July 1977, Vincent stood before a jury of 11 white men and 1 black woman. Crucially, even though the girls originally told police they didn't know the attacker and never mentioned a weapon, on the witness stand, they testified that Vincent introduced himself by name and threatened them with a gun and a knife.
So how are we to square the fact that that night you couldn't explain anything? You didn't have his name, you didn't know what he looked like, but now you're telling me today, and you testified at trial, that his name was Simmons.
That's right.
May I ask you, with all due respect?
Yes.
Why did you make that pact to not say anything? Why
We
wouldn't you
were scared.
immediately report it?
Because we were scared. He had told us, we were 14 years old. He told us that he had friends and that he would come back.
Vincent had alibi witnesses, people who said he was with them the night of the alleged attack, but the defense attorney barely questioned the inconsistencies, and he didn't bring up the girls' earlier statements. And even though there was no physical evidence tying him to the girls and no DNA, Simmons was found guilty and sentenced to 100 years at Angola State Prison. For years, Vincent filed motion after motion asking for access to the evidence in his own case. It wasn't until 1993, 16 years later, that he finally received the file. What he found inside changed everything. The medical examiner's report showed that both girls had no bruises, no injuries, no signs of assault whatsoever. All information the prosecution was legally required to turn over. But for decades, no Louisiana judge would even grant Vincent an evidentiary hearing until February 14, 2022. After 45 years, Vincent Simmons steps into a courtroom once more. But this time, something is different.
First thing I want to say to you is that I know my client is innocent.
Judge William Bennett reviews decades of contradictions, withheld documents, and medical evidence that should have been presented in 1977. Then, he says the words Vincent has waited nearly half a century to hear, and in a stunning turn, the district attorney announces he would not be retrying the case.
You free, bro. You free.
You're free. Done.
And that Vincent Simmons deserves a new trial. And that is when the shackles came off of his feet. The district attorney said he will not retry Simmons.
Just like that, the case that stole 45 years of Vincent's life collapses in seconds. And after 45 years of wrongful imprisonment, Vincent Alfred Simmons walks out of that Louisiana courtroom a free man.
What was that moment like for you when you realized that what the judge said meant you were a free man?
Yeah, it dawned on me. This is it. You know? Man, we've been waiting all these years for this.
You'll turn 70 on Thursday.
On Thursday.
Did you think you would die in prison?
Yes.
Simmons walked out of the place he has been held in since he was 25 years old.
However, the twin sisters, now at 59 years old, still believed he was guilty.
Went in guilty. He's guilty now, and guess what? He will die guilty.
You ready?
So I'm happy. Yeah.
Vincent survived 45 years behind bars for charges built on contradictions. And here is Daniel Villegas, who was a teenager and lost 18 years to a confession that wasn't even his. This is Daniel Villegas, and he is in court today to hear his fate after spending 18 years for a crime he has maintained he did not commit. According to reports, Villegas was a 16-year-old teenager from El Paso, Texas, who was accused of a double homicide he had nothing to do with. And the pressure that followed wasn't questioning, it was coercion. An El Paso detective threatened Daniel with beatings, the death penalty. And under that pressure, Daniel signed a confession he didn't write, a statement prepared entirely by detectives. Hours later, shaking and panicked, he begged to take it back, but it was too late. His signature had already become the state's entire case. Daniel was charged with 2 counts of capital murder with no DNA, no eyewitness putting him at the scene, no weapon, nothing except the confession extracted from a frightened kid. The first jury couldn't agree on a verdict, but at his retrial, the jury convicted him, and Daniel was sentenced to life in prison. Nearly 2 decades later, Villegas is released on bond, where he married while waiting for his next trial. And then finally, we're inside the courtroom for the 3rd trial, the trial that would decide everything.
If the defendant will please stand. In the District Court of El Paso County, Texas, 409th Judicial District, the State of Texas versus Daniel Villegas, number 94-0D09328. Verdict Form B. We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Villegas not guilty of...
The courtroom erupts in cheers and tears of joy from family members and friends, while Daniel collapses onto his chair. The judge looks at him and speaks the words Daniel has waited half his life to hear.
Mr. Villegas, you have been under many conditions in this court. You are no longer under any conditions in this court. You are free to leave. Thank you. Good luck to you, sir.
Just like that, Daniel Villegas becomes a free man, fully, finally, legally free. He has since filed a lawsuit against the city of El Paso for the years stolen from him. Daniel lost 18 years to a double murder he didn't commit. But here is Ricky Jackson, who lost 39, all because of the testimony of a 12-year-old who never actually saw anything. This is Ricky Jackson, a man who spent 39 years behind bars for a murder he did not commit. When he was arrested, he was 18, living an ordinary life in Cleveland, Ohio, until police arrived with a story they were determined to make stick. And that story came from one place, a 12-year-old boy named Eddie Vernon. Eddie told the court he saw Ricky commit a murder, but the truth, buried for decades, was that Eddie hadn't seen anything. According to Eddie, detectives pressured, coached, and pushed him until he repeated the words they wanted. Based on that single testimony, Ricky was sentenced to the electric chair. He spent 2 years on death row, waiting every day for a fate he didn't deserve, until his sentence was reduced to life in prison.
I could halfway accept my punishment if I was guilty, but, excuse me.
Nearly 40 years passed. Eddie Vernon grew up, grew older, and eventually grew tired of carrying a lie that ruined another man's life.
I said, I'll be with you, I'll support you. He just bust out crying. It's like something just came out.
At 52 years old, he finally came forward, stood before a judge, and said the truth, that he never witnessed the murder and his testimony should never have been used. With the foundation of the case destroyed, prosecutors had no choice but to drop all charges. And then, the moment. Ricky Jackson stands in court, older now.
We had a hearing a few days ago in which a new trial was granted, and Mr. Awadala, do you have to say anything?
Thank you, Your Honor. On behalf of the state of Ohio, to reiterate what Mr. McGinty said the other day, the state of Ohio at this time makes a motion to dismiss the case.
The judge clears his throat and delivers the words Ricky has been denied for most of his life.
All right, this case will be dismissed. Mr. Jackson, you're going to be free to go. I suggest to you that life is filled with small victories, and this is a big one.
Jackson does not show any outburst of emotion. After 39 stolen years, Ricky steps outside, a free man for the first time since he was a teenager.
You know, words can't express how I feel right now. I'm just glad to be out, glad to be a free man.
What are you going to do? Where are you going to go?
Wow. I mean, you know, you sit in prison for so long, you think about this day, but when it actually comes, you don't know what you just want to.
And the state of Ohio awarded him $1 million in compensation, and he later received an additional $2.65 million for lost income. And in a shocking twist, Jackson reconciled with the very man that helped put him behind bars.
You better trust the people who you know you can trust. So I wish you good luck.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
Ricky served 39 years for a murder that never should have been pinned on him, while Cornelius Dupree spent 30 years behind bars for a robbery, and DNA later proved he never committed. This is Cornelius Dupree in court, and at 51 years old, he is standing before a Dallas judge, not to be sentenced, but finally, officially declared innocent. For 3 decades, the justice system treated him like a man who robbed a young couple in 1979 and a woman at gunpoint. The case began with a photo lineup. The female victim pointed at Cornelius's picture, and that single moment became the anchor of everything that followed. An all-white jury convicted him and sentenced him to 75 years in prison. Just like that, a 20-year-old man became a number in the system.
Well, I really kind of believe that the system was like, you're innocent to proven guilty. But going through that process, I see it was just the opposite, that I was guilty to proven innocent.
Cornelius appealed his conviction 3 times, but lost all 3. And every time he went before the parole board, he was denied, not because of evidence, but because he refused to admit to being a sex offender. But Cornelius never caved.
Whatever it is, I never gave up hope. The hope is what kept me going.
Meanwhile, the truth sat preserved in an evidence room. The original DNA samples, untouched since 1979, were still there. When the Innocence Project stepped in, everything changed. DNA testing proved Cornelius was not involved in the crime at all. Now, inside a Dallas courtroom, Cornelius stands as the judge reviews the DNA results. And then,
robbery of a young couple and accused of raping the woman at gunpoint. The female victim identified him from a photo lineup. He was convicted by an all-white jury.
A line that should have been spoken decades earlier and could have saved him 30 years and the life he should have lived. He walked out of the courtroom not in chains, not with supervised freedom, but as what he always was, an innocent man.
Dupree appealed his conviction 3 times from prison and lost every time. He was repeatedly denied parole because he wouldn't admit to being a sex offender, refusing to admit to a crime everyone now knows he didn't commit.
Cornelius received tax-free $2.4 million in compensation from the state, $80,000 for each year he spent behind bars. Cornelius lost 30 years to a wrongful conviction, but how does that compare to a man who spent 25 years behind bars for the murder of his wife, while prosecution hid evidence of the real killer? This is Michael Morton in court, a man who spent 25 years of his life for the murder of his wife he did not commit.
He insisted he was innocent.
I didn't do this. I'm sorry, what?
Michael was just an ordinary husband and father in Austin, Texas. And then, one summer afternoon in 1986, everything collapsed. He got home from work to find sheriffs in his yard, his 3-year-old son alone outside, and his wife Christine murdered inside their bedroom. 6 weeks later, police arrested him.
Grief for her, because everything changed so rapidly away from her to me.
So were you a suspect from the very first moment?
Yeah, all the questions were adversarial, accusatory. It became clear to me that the sheriff showed up, looked around, and okay, they literally pulled my son out of my arms because he was screaming for me, and the little hand is out, and he's being pulled away,
And everything that came next, the trial, the theory, the conviction, was built almost entirely on a story the prosecutor, Ken Anderson, told the jury.
Williamson County District Attorney Ken Anderson prosecuted Michael Morton. He told the jury Morton killed his wife because she wouldn't have sex with him.
There was no murder weapon or direct evidence linking Morton to the crime, yet the jury believed the prosecutor and Michael Morton was sentenced to life in prison.
It got sickening after a while to watch him cry at the wrong times, and he seemed only to cry.
I told almost every senior class after that about this trial. And in a lot of detail sometimes. And I was thinking that we all pretty much came up with a guilty verdict.
All the while, Michael and his lawyers kept insisting he was innocent. They believed that something was missing, but no matter how many times they tried to get the prosecutor's full file, the doors stayed closed. Until decades later, Barry Scheck and Nina Morrison from the Innocence Project, along with attorney John Raley, got access. And what they found was shocking. A police report stated that Michael's 3-year-old son had actually witnessed the murder and said, "A monster with a mustache killed his mother, not his father."
He's talking about this police report in which Christine's mother told investigators that her 3-year-old grandson, Eric, had witnessed the murder and described to her in detail how he saw a monster with a big mustache kill his mother.
Another report from a neighbor who saw a suspicious man park a green van and walk behind the Morton home the morning of the murder. Evidence that, if shown to the defense in 1987, would have blown the prosecution's case apart. Evidence the prosecutor had, but never turned over.
Sitting in the prosecutor's file and sitting in the sheriff's file, there was a set of documents which, if they had been revealed and the defense had seen them, Michael Morton would have been acquitted.
After years of fighting the DA's office, Michael's team finally got permission to test a bloody bandana found near the crime scene. The results were devastating, not for Michael, but for the truth that had been buried for 25 years. It held Christine's blood and the DNA of a known felon named Mark Allen Norwood. Not only did Norwood match the DNA on the bandana, his DNA also matched another young woman murdered after Christine.
Here, DNA could set a man free 25 years after he went to prison for his wife. His attorneys say new DNA results prove Michael Morton did not his wife back in 1986. His attorneys want him released immediately.
That revelation cracked the case open, and Michael Morton walked out a free man.
Until last year, when he was exonerated by DNA testing.
Let's go.
By then, he had spent nearly 25 years of his life.
What was it like for you to walk from the court a free man?
It was so alien at first, it wasn't quite real. We stepped out of the courtroom, and it was a beautiful sunny day.
But Michael didn't stop at freedom. He returned to court for accountability. For the first time in Texas history, a judge ruled there was probable cause that a prosecutor, Ken Anderson, violated the law by withholding evidence that could have acquitted Michael Morton.